Today, we are strapping ourselves in for a truly wild ride back to 1990s Florida. We're tackling a phenomenon that, honestly, it almost defies belief. The bizarre and fiercely competitive world of the hot dog girls.
It sounds like a joke, but for a period in the late 80s and especially the early 90s, this was a massive, highly localized, and deeply controversial trend.
Yeah.
We're talking about roadside food vendors. Their carts often nicknamed things like Weenie Wagons or sometimes the more aggressive Wicked Weenie Women.
I like that one.
And their entire business model was built on an extreme dress code. So bikinis, and really the key here was the thong. That was the primary marketing gimmick.
And this wasn't like hidden away somewhere. This was right off major highways in places like Pinellas County and big parts of South Florida.
Exactly.
So the mission today is to cut through all the sensationalism and really map out how this whole thing worked. Our sources track the strange origins, the frankly shocking economics of why less clothing meant more profit.
A lot more profit.
The spectacular turf wars that involved mace and, I'm not kidding, literal mud wrestling, the public safety crisis that followed, and maybe the most fascinating part, the clever legal tricks authorities had to invent just to shut them down.
It's just a perfect case study of raw, opportunistic entrepreneurship colliding with local governments that were, they were completely unprepared for this level of spectacle.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start at the beginning. Who are the pioneers here? Who's the first person who figures out that, adding a bikini to a hot dog stand is a great business model?
Well, the origins are actually a bit fractured. Depending on who you ask and where you look, there are two different figures who really claim to be the original.
And the stories themselves, there's such a great contrast.
They really are. So if you look at the earliest records, the whole thing seems to bubble up first in Miami, mid-'80s. You can find classified ads from 1986 looking for bikini vendors.
Okay.
The figure most people cite as the OG of the whole concept is the woman named Gloria Gonzalez.
And her story is just pure Florida folklore.
It is. The tale is that she started the trend completely by accident. Supposedly, she put her bathing suit in the dryer. It shrunk.
No.
But she just wore it to work anyway. It's this almost mythic beginning, an accidental discovery.
An accidental discovery of a market niche.
Exactly. Now, you compare that to the person who brought the concept to Tampa Bay, a woman named Valerie Workman, around 1990. Her approach was completely intentional.
Tell us more about her. She sounds like a very different kind of pioneer.
Oh, she was highly strategic. Workman was a former exotic dancer, but she was also a black belt in martial arts.
Wow.
And she saw this not as some novelty, but as a legitimate and very lucrative alternative to low-wage jobs. She specifically said she saw it as a way to stay off welfare and support her 3 kids.
So this wasn't an accident for her. It was a calculated business move.
Absolutely. Built on past experience.
That's a critical distinction. Okay, so one person stumbles into it. The other applies a known market strategy to a new place. Where did this all spread geographically?
It spread right along the key arteries of traffic. So in South Florida, the hot spots were places like Perimeter Road near the Miami airport, Pines Boulevard, and US 27.
Big intersections.
Huge intersections. Then when it moved north, Pinellas County became the real epicenter. We're talking US Highway 19, Gandy Boulevard. These are huge multi-lane highways where thousands of commuters, a lot of them construction workers or guys on their lunch break, are passing by every single hour.
So once they have the geography locked down, we have to talk about the core element that just escalated everything, the thong.
Yeah.
It's kind of disturbing how directly profitability was tied to the level of exposure.
It was entirely financial. The sources don't really use the word ethical, but the financial pressure, the compulsion was absolutely clear in the reporting.
Yeah.
The whole reason things escalated was just simple economics. The vendors figured out really fast that, let's say, optimizing the visibility of their assets was the direct driver of sales.
Okay, unpack those numbers for us because the data from the sources is pretty striking.
We can look at a vendor named Sarah Linsky in Fort Myers. She broke down her earnings based on what she was wearing.
Okay.
In a standard bikini, she said she made roughly $125 a day.
Which is not bad for back then.
Not bad at all. But when she switched to what the papers always called a thong or a T-back, her daily take-home pay immediately jumped to $200.
Whoa. That's a staggering, what is that, a 60% increase? Just for less fabric.
Exactly. And that daily income, that translated into serious money for the early 90s. Some vendors were reporting nearly $700 a week.
$700 a week.
And they were often only working short shifts, maybe 16 hours a week during lunch and rush hour.
Mm.
This was mostly cash, unregulated. I mean, it was a huge sum when the minimum wage was around $4.25 an hour.
The incentive was just enormous.
It was.
So who was the main clientele driving this?
The sources are really consistent on this. It was predominantly male, construction crews, guys in the service industry, commuters on their lunch break. Interestingly, there's a brief mention of hunky male vendors trying to appeal to women, but it never really gained any traction.
So that incredible profit potential created immense pressure to get the absolute best roadside spots. And that, of course, brings us to Wienermania. This was not a friendly competition.
Oh, not at all. The turf wars were inevitable. I mean, you have these unregulated cash businesses fighting for a dozen or so extremely lucrative corners on major highways. Things are going to get ugly.
And the most famous feud was between two women in Pinellas County.
Yes, Cindy Gray, who ran the Perfect 10 Wiener Wagon,
Yeah.
and Hala Salomon, who ran Hala's Wild Wieners.
Perfect 10. Okay. So how does this rivalry go from just, shouting matches to actual physical combat?
The catalyst was classic spot theft. So Cindy Gray had to take about a week off to get some repairs done on her cart.
Okay.
While she was gone, Hala Salomon's employees saw the opening and moved their operation right onto Cindy's prime spot on US 19. So when Cindy comes back to reclaim her territory, a huge physical brawl breaks out on the side of the highway. It got so bad, police had to get involved because someone used mace in the fight.
Mace. Fighting over hot dog territory. It's just, It's hard to imagine anything more emblematic of 90s Florida than what happened next.
It is the absolute high watermark of local spectacle. The local radio station, Q105, they saw all the media frenzy around this and decided to, monetize it.
Of course they did.
They hosted a public event to settle the rivalry once and for all. They called it Wienermania, and it was held in July of 1991 at a place called the Yucatan Liquor Stand.
And who are the actual fighters in this bizarre scenario?
Cindy Gray herself got in the ring, and she was facing off against one of Hala Salomon's champions, a woman named Kathleen Cook, who was very aptly nicknamed Kathy the Macer.
Kathy the Macer. You can't make this stuff up. So what was the result? And more importantly, what was the bizarre aftermath of this fight?
Well, Cindy Gray was declared the winner of the mud wrestling match. But the event was so chaotic that fans started jumping into the pit to join in.
Oh, wow.
It just devolved into a total mess. But the most enduring, memorable detail, the one that really grounds this whole absurdity in reality, was the health consequences.
The mud itself was toxic.
Exactly. The promoters had just used whatever was available, so the mud was actually chemically treated potting soil. Pretty much everyone who wrestled in it later suffered from these severe skin rashes and irritation. It's just this perfect skin-irritating coda to the whole ridiculous spectacle.
And that really brings us to a major shift in the story. We're moving now from the spectacle, the absurd competition, to the very serious and dangerous public safety crisis that finally forced the government's hand.
That's right. The term distraction factor, that wasn't a joke to law enforcement. The amount of rubbernecking and just reckless driving caused by these vendors became genuinely catastrophic.
And what were some of the documented consequences?
The reports are actually terrifying. In Fort Lauderdale, a driver who was, openly distracted by a vendor rear-ended another car.
Okay.
The collision was so serious that the victim, who was a pregnant woman, was sent into labor 2 months early. That's the real human cost of this.
And that wasn't just an isolated incident, right?
Far from it. We have documented cases in Pinellas County, too, including one report of a semi-truck flipping over on Ulmerton Road.
A semi-truck?
Yeah, and the commentary at the time suggested the driver had slammed on his brakes trying to pull over quickly near one of the vendors. These weren't just fender-benders.
That level of danger finally forced a concentrated police response.
It did. Police started making arrests for things like public nuisance, inciting unsafe driving. A vendor named Annette Berriman, for example, she was arrested after police basically staked out her spot and witnessed multiple accidents and near misses from drivers staring at her instead of the road.
And on top of the safety issues, there were also, pretty gross sanitation complaints.
Oh, absolutely. People complaining about seeing vendors, say, adjusting their thongs and then immediately serving hot dogs without washing their hands because there was no running water.
Right, so the community's demanding action, but the local governments were kind of trapped. Why couldn't they just use standard anti-nudity laws to solve this?
And this is where the legal side gets fascinating. Standard anti-nudity laws were often written too vaguely. They'd focus on, say, covering primary genitalia or breasts.
Right, but not this.
Right. Since the vendors were technically wearing a thin strip of cloth, a thong, over their buttocks, many local governments found they couldn't get convictions. The vendors would argue it was their First Amendment right.
So the authorities had to get surgically precise with the law, right down to the anatomical level.
Absolutely. The creativity of these local legislative bodies is, it's astonishing. Pinellas County basically pioneered a whole new type of moral ordinance in 1993. They passed a law specifically outlawing the public exposure of one's anal cleft.
They had to legislate the anal cleft.
They had to. They combined it with a ban on selling food while exposing genitals, pubic hair, or buttocks. The goal was to be so specific that a thong couldn't possibly be argued as adequate covering anymore.
And the attempts down in South Florida were just as desperate and, frankly, kind of absurd.
Yeah, Palm Beach County had a series of failures. In '92, they tried to force vendors to wear wider thongs, but Gloria Gonzalez, the pioneer,
She sued them.
she sued and got that struck down immediately. Then in '94, they tried to mandate that all vendors had to stand behind a 4-foot screen.
Imagine trying to serve a hot dog to someone in a car from behind a 4-foot screen. It's an administrative nightmare. Just screams desperation.
Well, it was pure desperation. And because these decency laws were so messy and always getting tied up in court, the government needed a clean kill. And they found it. Not in morality, but in plumbing.
The final blow. The bathroom strategy. How did the health code succeed where everything else failed?
It's fascinating. The most effective, the least controversial, and the most legally sound tool was the one that addressed those public hygiene concerns we talked about.
The hand washing.
Exactly. The counties, tired of fighting these constitutional battles over thongs, just started rigorously enforcing existing health codes. Specifically, the rule that required all food vendors to have immediate access to running water and a flush toilet.
And a simple roadside cart could never, ever satisfy that requirement.
It's an impossible mandate for their business model. They had no connection to city infrastructure, so they couldn't meet that fundamental sanitation requirement, and they were systematically forced to close. The entire movement just collapsed around 1994.
So in the end, it was a lack of plumbing, not a lack of clothing, that proved fatal. It's hard to believe this entire spectacle, from the accidental invention to mud wrestling to legislating anatomy, it all peaked and collapsed in about a 5-year window.
An incredibly concentrated timeline. And when you look back at the cultural memory of it in our sources, it's still deeply polarized. You see people looking back with this real nostalgia, what a time to be alive, and others who just remember it as ridiculous, nasty, and a dangerous public nuisance.
And even years later, the job required incredible resilience.
Absolutely. One of the last holdouts, a vendor interviewed in 2000, told a reporter the job required a thick skin and a sharp tongue. It just shows you the level of constant friction involved.
So if we connect all this to the bigger picture, it really raises a question for you to think about. Considering the extreme lengths the vendors went to for profit and the creative, almost theatrical lengths the government went to for regulation, from mace fights to anal cleft ordinances and finally just needing a toilet, what does the whole saga of the hot dog girls tell you about the American tolerance for controversial, opportunistic, but highly visible entrepreneurship? That tension is a really delicious complexity worth mulling over.